How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, great discussion coming our way. We're going to talk about the psychological aspect of reporting corrupt behavior, or on a lesser scale, unethical. Difference being corruption kind of crosses that line. Definitely something that is going to violate the law. Where unethical could be more of a feeling, could cross into something corrupt. But at a minor scale, unethical is usually more about a violation of trust. I'll give an example. Maybe favoritism to an inmate could be considered unethical. Is it illegal? Not at this point just yet, but it definitely could cross into something if we allow it to happen. Unethical, I usually find nothing's all-inclusive here, but unethical, we look to maybe try to prevent. So basically, if I see someone doing something that doesn't make me feel right, I may go ahead and talk to them, try to see if they understand their actions, where when it's corrupt, there's just going to be the report. I saw what you did. I'm going to write the report, give it up to the next chain of command. I'm not here to try to negotiate that out. The line has been crossed. And if I sit there now and try to negotiate that out, I could become an accomplice for not doing the right thing. So granted, I don't know if that's all inclusive, what I just said, but I think that's kind of just an understanding of one could be more on the preventive side and one is it's happened. And now this person needs to be held accountable and you have to play your role in doing that. Most of the time, the complication when it comes to reporting a concern usually has nothing to do with the professional decision that has to be made. I mean, it's an easy decision. I mean, in the case of contraband, I saw you violate the law by giving this inmate something they shouldn't have. So that violates the law, violates policy and procedure. But we make it more complicated by bringing in our relationships with those individuals or the fear of being a social outcast if how we're going to be perceived by doing the right thing. On the other note, for the lesser scale, let's say the unethical behavior, most of the time it's not what we actually see, so we don't really have evidence on it. It's more of how it makes us feel. And at that point, we're not really going on evidence. We're going on, something doesn't feel right. Now, because it's still surrounded by ambiguity, there's always a way to seek clarity. If I see, for an example, let's say an officer is treating this inmate better than the other inmates, let's just say, in a manner that obviously shows this inmate's a favorite, I would go ahead and let the officer know what I see, how it makes me feel, the perception that could be seen by others. And then hopefully this makes the officer think twice about whatever is happening. Because sometimes they may not know. But with that said, the unethical part is usually tougher to commit an action to because there's nothing there. It just could be just a feeling based on experience that now you have to try to bring to light with that individual. And again, a good thing about that is once you feel something and you make it known, hopefully it is just... maybe the person that you're told to is just unaware of what they're doing or how it's perceived. And maybe they accept your advice and they go ahead and they correct themselves. Or, lesser scale, they just don't do it in front of you. So either way, making it known to that person first, to me, is the correct thing because maybe there is some level of ignorance to what they're doing. I also want to let people know to be very careful when you go to approach a matter. Like, as I said, if it's something unethical, and instead of you going directly to that person for clarity, you wind up going ahead and talking to everyone else and letting the rumor mill spill. I rather just, if you have a problem with the way this person shows favoritism to an inmate, it's nothing illegal, just, this inmate's always out when you're around. And when you're by the podium, the inmate's like not in front of you, they're on the side of you. It just doesn't look right. And then instead of you going ahead and talking to them directly to get clarity or maybe correct them, you wind up telling everybody else. And now there's a rumor mill that spills, and maybe this officer was just truly not paying attention to these interactions, and now it just becomes just more of a divide. So I think we should get to a point where we're able to try to correct somebody without feeling that we're going to lose that relationship. And I want to make sure people know that. And if you feel that you're going to lose that relationship, that still should not prevent you from approaching that person and letting them know, because again, you want to make sure that it doesn't cross into behavior that could be more criminal in nature. Now, I also want to make it known that sometimes these behaviors may not always be directly related to an inmate. It could also be how we treat each other, whether it's frontline of management, peer-to-peer, different departments, how they react. I mean, there's going to be many ways unethical behavior can definitely come across, but also corrupt behaviors. So with that said, I just want to go over some of the behaviors that we do not support in corrections, and that if we feel that these behaviors are occurring, then it may be in our role to do something, especially if it's right in front of us and the evidence cannot be challenged. This is what we saw, and now we have a duty to act. Again, with unethical, again, nothing's 100%, but at first, it could be just a feeling. Something doesn't feel right. So having said that, when you don't have all that evidence in front of you and it's rather ambiguous, you may seek clarity by going to that individual and just trying to find out a little bit more, and then letting them know how you feel, what you see. And that could be a little harder because, again, you're not really leaning on anything but your own experience. So that's more of the trust you have in yourself. Where if it crosses into corruption, there's something you've seen. There's an action there. And now it becomes your duty to actually write something about it, report it to your superiors, whatever the chain may be, but you have a duty to respond. And if you don't respond at that point, to be honest with you, you will be seen as part of the cover-up if they believe you knew something about it. And as I said before, I don't know if I said in this video, but I definitely said in other videos, we don't respond sometimes or do the right thing, not because we're trying to cover it up, but because we don't want to be seen as social outcasts. Feelings of guilt or regret, that feeling of that relationship that we develop with that individual, or how we're going to be treated by those who believe that we're now a snitch, usually affect us. So again, when we get to this video a little bit later, we'll talk about ways to alleviate those feelings, which can help motivate people to do the right thing. So some of the corrupt behaviors are unethical. This definitely will fall into corruption, is the smuggling of contraband. Again, if you see somebody bringing in something, I don't care how small it is, and it's not supposed to be in that facility, something should be done about it. Again, whether it's a burger for themselves or drugs, it shows a weakness in the system. It shows that there's a breach. And some people may look at things as being superficial, but guys, if one thing can make it pass, so can another. So you have to kind of look at it from the greater scale, the breach of security. So with that said, that should be a no-brainer. That's something that you should be able to see in front of you and then know that you have a duty to respond. Bribery and extortion. Again, if that's something that you see or you hear, that's 100% something that needs to be reported. Falsification of reports. Now, we're not talking about reports that may be inconsistent to some extent. Maybe we got to find some consistency. We're talking about reports that are totally in conflict with what happened. We're talking about reports that are on extremes. This person said this happened, but this person said this happened. This is totally unique, totally different from each other. And again, guys, even if someone tells you to falsify a report, even if you may think that they have your back, you got to note that. You got to note that, hey, I'm not here to violate the integrity of my report. I mean, I understand that maybe I can make updates to it, but I'm not going to change anything that violates the integrity of what my original report is. And again, that truly, what's on that report matters. It's a reflection of you. So if you do see reports, even as a supervisor, where the reports just don't make sense, or maybe they're too similar, just identical, put some more eyes on it, definitely review it a little bit more, make sure that we're not trying to hide something or outright falsifying on a report. And again, there's evidence there, so that's something you'd want to report. The abuse of power is more about the outcome. So you do have people that can abuse power, which is more unethical to some extent, like showing favoritism could be one. And guys, when you show favoritism to one, obviously other people aren't receiving that same benefit. So you're taking away from them to give to the other. But then you have abuse of the power that could be corrupt, like just you're in a position of authority and you're using it to punish the inmates and take away their rights, not their privileges, their rights. Again, just an example, but you can see those in both. Embezzlement and fraud, nepotism and favoritism, which we just talked about. Cover up and collusions definitely falls under corruption. If you know something's happened and you're involved with, trying to erase the video or just trying to change some reports around, as we mentioned. Sometimes all these things bleed into each other. Sexual misconduct, misuse of force, tampering with evidence, which we just discussed, intimidation or coercion of witnesses. So if you have someone that did the right thing and now you got staff that are intimidating the individual, making threats, and then you have undue familiarity. Now, guys, all this stuff, I mean, this is not an all-inclusive list, but the main conflict when it comes to reporting these behaviors is usually centered around relationships. I mean, that's truly what it is. You know, either I don't want to be an outcast amongst my peers, or either, oh man, I knew this person. My mind is blown. I can't believe they would do this. You know, I've hung out with this person every day. And then the conflict becomes rather personal. You know what needs to be done. You know what has to be done. But we wind up overcomplicating it by bringing in the personal element to it. And now this is easier said than done. But right off the bat, you have to remove the personal element from the right choice. You have to, or else it's going to wind up weighing you down. It's going to make you feel guilty. Later on, it could turn into regret. And I also like to say on a greater scale, and we'll probably get to that in a little bit, your peers also have to understand that as well. You know, the ones that you feel are going to push you out of this trust because you went ahead and had to do something. You had to report some level of corruption, something that was there that you had to report. And you hope that your peers would also do the same and remove that personal connection and understand why you had to do what you had to do. Because at one point, it's either going to be you or them. And if you're going to make me have to make a choice where my career is on the line, that's your fault. That's not mine. And I'm not going to regret having to make a decision that helps me so I can better help my family or myself in this career. So again, when we're looking at ways to report things, I know a lot of people will say, well, the facility needs more access to anonymous reporting. This kind of alleviates, well, everybody's going to know it's me if I said something. Well, here's my thing with that. I want to separate two things. I want to separate being anonymous and being confidential. I believe, and this is hard, I know this ain't going to be well received by many, but in a perfect world, I would like to believe that there's trust in the system, whether you move things higher up or whether you go to the investigative division. Now, granted, all these elements do have people that represent, they don't represent it in the best manner. They make us lose trust in what those areas are. So I may have a problem with Joe Schmo. Joe Schmo's a shit supervisor, so I don't trust all supervisors. Or I have a problem with Joe Schmo, who's an investigator, so I don't trust all investigators. Or I don't trust all administration because of whatever, an issue with Joe Schmo. So if I'm going to report something, I'm going to report it anonymously. That's tough later on when you got to look to verify the sources, especially if it's an act of corruption. It's an act that's going to require maybe some level of immediate action. Sometimes understand the difference between anonymous and confidential matters, because you could still be anonymous at a certain point when you report something confidential, as long as we trust the route or the due process it takes. But I think eventually the follow-through will eventually expose the source. I mean, it is what it is, but that's part of what we do. I mean, we do it all day. If I see an inmate doing something wrong, I don't have someone else approach the inmate for me. I approach the inmate and I address it. And there's courage in that, and that's done every day. But with that said, you got to have that same courage amongst your peers, amongst people that are truly violating the law. And then the agency also has to step up and make an effort to protect you. So with that said, these should be trusted routes. And I would like to say that you can go to those routes unless there's conflict. So if I have an issue with, let's say, a sergeant, I'm not going to go to any of the sergeants. Maybe I'll go to a lieutenant. But with that said, I'm going to go to whatever route I need to go that eliminates the conflict of the integrity of the process. But with that said, for those that want to do it anonymous, I get it. Let's just put it out there. But when you do it anonymous, you really got to have specific evidence, time, dates, something that they can lean on, and not just something like, oh, such and such is too close to the inmates, and then just throw it out there with no name. You know, if you feel someone's too close to the inmates, then maybe there's a confidential route you can go where you could be interviewed, and then you can discuss what your concerns are. So it gives the people that got to look into it a little bit more information. Sometimes we get these anonymous notes that are very general in nature. Can't do much with that. That's going to require a follow-up, but I can't follow up because there's no name on it. So again, if it's something truly specific that you could detail and you feel the safer route because you can't trust your agency as an anonymous note, well, my thing is this: if you can't trust them, what do you think they're going to do with an anonymous note? So again, some people may disagree with that, but the point is, I think that when you approach it in a confidential manner, and when I say confidential is, yes, someone I am reporting to is going to know it's me that's saying these concerns, but hopefully I trust in the due process that they'll keep it confidential until they start truly moving forward with what needs to be done. Because obviously, eventually, when the investigation takes wind, people start to kind of figure out who said something, but it's expected. But that's when the agency is already in plan to protect the individual who brought the original concern up. So with that said, I'm not a true big fan of the anonymous route. I think it lacks accountability, or it just opens up the door to any type of complaint. But with that said, it should be an option that's offered, especially if there are specific concerns and there's a lack of trust in the facility. So again, anonymous complaints could be a route. If you do see stuff, guys, as I said, you want to make sure that you document patterns, especially if you're dealing with unethical behavior, something that may be more based on a feeling than it is actual evidence. Sometimes by documenting everything, those patterns actually showcase something. The patterns actually lead to something bigger. So with that said, if you're able to document everything, but more importantly, document those patterns, take really good notes and document patterns of, let's say in this case here, shown favoritism. You can go ahead and give that documentation over where people now have more to go on than just one incident. It's like, yeah, but I know you may have an excuse for this one day, but you know, this seems to be an ongoing pattern with this one individual, or whatever the case may be. Just understand when you're documenting everything, you're documenting patterns. You're documenting ways for people to have more evidence to look into. And obviously, if it's one incident, then document everything about that incident. This is what happened. This is where it happened. This is when it happened. This is who was involved. This is how it happened. I mean, you want to be specific as possible for that incident. But if it's something that is more of just of a feeling, then document why you're getting those feelings each and every time you see something. And then maybe those patterns could develop into something a little bit bigger. As I said, I mentioned follow chain of command. The chain of command is the route that you should be the trusted route to go to. But with that said, I get it. Sometimes people will find conflict in the chain of command. Usually that conflict could come in the form of a good old boy group or whatever it is. If I tell them, I know that in the end they're going to tell that employee they're close, then you got to go to the highest level that you need to go to alleviate that conflict. And if you can't do it there at the facility, but you know you got something, then you're going to have to either get legal advice or you have to go to an external agency or both. But the point is, you have to go where you feel there's a trusted method to protect you. And what I mean by protection is the retaliation aspect. And we'll get to that because that's going to cross into why we may not report something right away. but you need to alleviate whatever that conflict is. And if you can't alleviate the conflict from within the normal chains, then you got to still do what you got to do, but you're going to have to report it outside. And that's where you may, after you talk to your certain, you may want like a legal team, because you could assume if you can't trust that chain on the inside, then you know when something starts to come back on the inside, you could be a target. So you need to do what you can to minimize that target. I'm not saying everything's 100%, but sometimes having a legal team next to you could, note patterns of retaliation as long as you start to document what you need to document. We talked about use of internal agencies, seek legal advice. We talked about this briefly. I just want to go it again. Guys, there is the thing about trusting your intuition. So again, it's sometimes before you actually see something, you may feel something, and that's usually the harder thing. So that usually falls into the preventive measure. If I don't actually see it, but I feel something, I may approach the person for clarity and then see where the dialogue goes from there. See if there is something I need to report. But as I said before, it kind of serves two things. One is maybe the person doesn't know and I'm helping them with some corrective action, or at least they won't do it in front of me. And I think this intuition part makes it tougher if you're really new and it's against someone who has over 25 years. I mean, outside of the developed relationships, there's this gap in experience, and well, maybe what they're doing is correct. Maybe I'm seeing it wrong because I'm still a junior in this profession or whatnot. But having said that, if you need clarity, you should be able to go to people like a supervisor. I'd rather go up the chain if I could, not across, because I don't want to start a rumor mill in the process. But I could go up the chain, maybe very general, and say, hey, this is how I feel. What would you do if you saw somebody maybe doing these things with an inmate? Nothing crazy, but just a level of favoritism. I'm not going to go ahead and say everybody's name. I'm just seeking for advice before I move forward. And this way you're kind of guided. And I think, to be honest with you, when it comes to new boots, the support for them matters in order for them to do the right thing, because there's so many things that they have to, so many obstacles that get in their way, which includes more than a senior staff would have to deal with, is that social outcast and that following intuition. If I'm a senior staff, I got experience, I got no problem going up to someone that's even new, whatever, or could even have a little more time than me. It doesn't matter, but I've been in the profession long enough to let someone know, hey, I don't like what you feel. I don't like what you're doing. I don't like how I see it. Just correct yourself when you're around me. Again, I got experience to lean on, so I'm able to be more motivated, where the rookies may not. So they may be a little bit less motivated, a little bit more hesitant, and then a little more doubtful of themselves in the process. Like, did they really see what they saw? It's just so many obstacles in the way that our support can help them motivate them to do the right thing. Now, here's the impact I want to mention. So a lot of people that may look at law enforcement in general may feel that we choose not to report something because we're part of the cover-up. And that's not the case. Even though I'm not minimizing or negating our responsibility to report something, that's not the case, and that's not how you want to address it. So if I say, yeah, you're part of the cover-up, you should say something now, that's not going to help me remain motivated. That's not the issue of why I'm not reporting it. I could be, as I said, there's a fear of retaliation. If I report it, is the agency going to protect me? Or once the case is done, are you going to throw me back to the wolves? Like, here I am, I'm going to do the right thing. But now if you need me to go a step further, how are you going to help me make sure that I don't feel the pressure from my peers to step away? So again, there's always going to be the fear of retaliation. So what does your agency do to protect people who are doing the right thing? Kind of like the SEPA, the Conscientious Employee Protective Act, or the Whistleblower Act. So again, that's a good way to motivate people, is to let them know that if you're going to do the right thing, the agency will do whatever they can throughout your career to make sure you're good, and not just during the investigation or up until the matter gets resolved. Because I've heard about that in through the many people I talk to, that you get all this support during the process, but then you're sent to the wolves once the process is over. No, this is continued. This stays for however long it's needed, or that employee feels that they need it. They've done the right thing, so the support's got to be there for them. Part of the retaliation, obviously, we're talking about social isolation, which could also create a hostile working environment for that individual because they have no one to go to if they need help. They feel alone. I mean, for me, I've been through a situation very similar to this, and I felt two things. One was I felt it was complicated. So I did feel that, doing the right thing was complicated because it wasn't so much about, as I mentioned, knowing what I had to do. It's about how it's going to be received by everyone. I wasn't really so concerned about the person who crossed the line. I was more concerned about the perception because I knew I wasn't going to go around telling everybody what I did or what I saw, but that person would. And that person's going to create a narrative that people may believe. So having said that, I can't counter-influence that. So I was very concerned about the perception. But then there's also this feeling of being alone. And there's nothing I can do to fix that. That really requires the support of my peers. Even if it's just one person, one ride or die, that matters. So again, when you're dealing with it, there is a feeling of being alone. And then if you have threats or intimidation or people just throwing dimes at your feet, it makes the environment extremely hostile. And that will travel into the family life. You're dreading to come to work because of that, your peers to some extent, or maybe your supervisors, people that should be thanking you for doing the right thing. But now they're letting their personal relationship with that individual affect you, which at the end of the day is unfair. I should be, if I did the right thing, the amount of courage that takes to do that is not easy. And now for those that didn't do the right thing, they don't even honor that amount of courage. They just wind up ridiculing you for doing the right thing because it happened to affect a person that they liked. Which, to be honest, that's another tough thing too, guys, because sometimes the people that get caught up tend to be the most likable people. They tend to hold a facade where I can't believe it's them. Well, maybe you never really knew him to begin with, or her. The label or stigma is tough, especially if you do it early in your career and you haven't really built that confidence. So the label of being a snitch or whatnot can truly affect how you see yourself, but also more importantly, how you see your relationship with others. And again, more so at the beginning of your career because you're still developing relationships. You're trying to be a person that has trust with your peers, whereas a senior officer could still affect you, as a senior staff member could definitely still affect you. But hopefully there's relationships that you developed along the way that can supersede people that are saying that superficially, but also with yourself. You know what? At this point, I don't need the approval to do what's right. If people see it or not, I really don't care. But when you're a rookie and you're looking to be accepted to some extent, it could become extremely difficult for you to navigate that type of environment where you have that stigma. I mean, because again, it may be harder for you to confront the individual, where if I hear the label, I may go up to them, hey, you got a problem? You want to tell me what that problem is? Because I'm hearing you're saying this. And then again, I've been in the profession long enough, but for a rookie, that's hard. They're, as again, developing relationships, and more importantly, they're looking to be accepted, where I'm not at this point. I got 3 years left. I don't care whether you accept me or not, but I'm not going to let you bastardize me. So I think the psychological concern here is that the rookie is looking to be accepted, and that makes it a little bit more difficult, where for me, if you're saying it about me, I don't really care about being accepted or not. So that's not really affecting me, but you're going to tell me what your thoughts are. And, if anything, it's more about clarity, but I'm not going to let somebody bastardize my name either, but I'm not going to take it inward. I have enough confidence in myself to not absorb that, where a rookie may absorb that. We talked about the mental health train. So the social consequences here that kind of relate to why people may not report it. And again, not minimizing or gating it, but just letting you be aware so we could do something about it, is they feel that there'll be a loss of trust. Now this is funny because I can actually see this actually affecting senior staff more than rookies, because even though I just mentioned rookies are still trying to earn trust, so I get that part. But if me and you are boys and, we developed a relationship where trust is beyond belief, violating that trust, or in your mind, violating that trust could be a lot harder because we developed into this relationship. So technically, I guess on two extremes, you have one that's looking for acceptance, that's the rookie. So they're looking to build trust. So it makes it a bit complicated for them. But then you have those that already have established the trust. And now there's what you call the violation of that trust. As a rookie, I may not have violated the trust yet. But as a senior staff and we're together, now you believe I have. And guys, the right thing is, it's funny because the perception sometimes could be twisted. If you look at the right thing as the personal relationship, that's the wrong way to look at it. That's not where you want to put your effort. The effort is what's expected of you. So what's right is always going to be what the agency expects from your position. So I don't think the right thing is subjective unless you're allowing the personal relationship to supersede what you need to do. We talked about the fear of the cold shoulder, the career impact. The career impact is tough because that's where the label could also play in. As you start to move up, especially if it's rather quick, related to, like, let's say you did the right thing, you reported someone, and then they decide to promote you based on that. Well, you did the right thing, and we trust your integrity, and we want to move you up. That may not be a good time to take that promotion, and I'm going to explain why. However you want to take this, you got to take it. When you have someone that has crossed the line, and it's someone that truly shocked you, truly shocked the team, we all have to go through a process where we're going to be in denial, disbelief, and then eventually some of us will turn around, some of us won't, but some of us will, but we all go through that level of denial first, and that denial could be rather aggressive. I mean, to the point where we minimize the person who did the right thing, and that person's outright lying. There's no way Gangi would do that. So there's a process that the facility has to go through, especially if it comes from someone that was not expected. Sometimes we know, and it's like, okay, I kind of figured that was going to happen. But then you got those that really just truly shock you, and that is a culture shock. And believe it or not, everyone's affected by it. So you got to be wary of how you reward certain behavior that instills the integrity that you want. Because I know reward and recognition could be seen as supportive, and that's great, but the timing matters. If you do it before it's fully been accepted as to what happened, that could actually have an adverse effect on the officer or on the staff member that did the right thing, because it just hasn't settled in what happened. Now, granted, and I'll probably get in here in a little bit, reward and recognition is not supposed to be done in a manner that's superficial, that's just basically more of a pat on your shoulder, good old boy. It's supposed to be done in an effort to support. So when you look at it from that manner, you have to also include the context of what's the best timing for that to be something where we can show support behind it without adversely affecting the person who did it. Now, I know people may say, well, wait a second, the agency should show support 100%. Yes, they should. And I'm not saying that. Of course they should. But I think the timing matters, because when someone sees something coming from the agency, they may not see it as support. They may see it as recognition. And now all of a sudden, the integrity behind why it's done is being questioned. And that puts that person in a very unique spot. So what I would do is I would make sure that it's kind of settled out, and the recognition could be comfortably seen, even as both. That's fine. The agency recognizing the effort behind what was done, and then also showing support. But if you do it too soon, it's not going to be the supportive function. It's going to be just recognizing the effort and then maybe to some people exploiting that. So again, I think the support may be more behind the scenes at first, at least amongst the higher ups. I would like to see the peer-to-peer accountability come first, to be honest with you, when it comes to what we expect from each other, and then support for the people doing the right thing. So I think, to be honest with you, before I even look for management support, let's say I had to report something that I was uncomfortable with, but I did the right thing. I need my peers to accept me first before management and anybody else does. And the only reason why I'm saying that is because when it starts traveling the way up, people don't see it as 100% supportive. They see it as more recognition, even though it could be supportive. But if it originates from the house, from your peers, and it travels up that way, it becomes more of a unified thing. And then at that point, it could even be expected. Like, where's management support on this? Where's management support on this? So that's a good chance for them to come in. But granted, I'm not saying they're not supporting the whole time. It could be more behind the scenes. But I just want to be wary of what that perception is. And definitely something worth discussing. We talked about support systems. So we got to develop policies that are extremely supportive. I know people here are going to probably go back to the anonymous reporting. Again, I'm not a real big fan of the anonymous reporting. I think we should have a trusted system in which confidentiality allows for us to report something and put our name to it. But with that said, you do need policies that are supportive, that do help the individual who needs to do it. So if at first, if they don't know they can trust the system, and I said if they don't know they can trust the system, that's different than knowing you can't trust the system. If I know I can't trust the system, I'm probably not going to do an anonymous report either. I think that's wasted time. I'm probably going to go another route. But if I don't think I can trust the system, I may toss in an anonymous note or two to see what happens. But again, I got to be damn specific. It's got to be actionable, because there's no way that what I'm saying could be verified through me. So I got to be specific and give them evidence that they could look into. You got to create policies that relate to anti-retaliation, which will fall, as I mentioned, into the Conscientious Employee Protective Act, or just the Whistleblower Act. So basically, if there's any hint that you reported something and you're being retaliated against based on what you reported, and that's proven, and sometimes that's just may not be so overt, but rather a pattern. That's why you may want to document everything, but really look at it. I mean, is this subjectively how you're interpreting it, or is this truly what's happening? But you want to document interactions so people could see the pattern and then build a context, as opposed to just saying one and you providing the context. Like, hey guys, you're getting a little bit too subjective with this. Every time you talk to someone or you have a bad day, it's because it's retaliation. No, that's not how it works. It's usually a developed pattern. It's usually more than one, and you got to remove the subjectivity to it. I mean, it's got to outright be something that can be proven that you're being treated different than others or more hostile. Again, you want to promote a culture of integrity. You want ethics training. You want to reward in time behaviors that model integrity. You want to instill it in the people that work in that agency, so people know this is what's expected. And this also helps on so many levels. One, it builds the trust, knowing that if you do the right thing, you're going to be supported. But also lets people know what you're going to tolerate and what you're not going to tolerate, the expectations. So that to me, that culture of integrity matters. Russ would also lean on that as well. We had a show yesterday, but the sound wasn't working, so I kind of had to redo this. So guys, I hope this helps. I mean, I discovered this while I was doing my report writing book. I mentioned this briefly, but more of it in the context of report writing. But as always, guys, the show is taped. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.